Both you, Kaveh, and Ryan, I'd like to ask your personal and professional opinion about to what extent do you believe the family's expectations can be met through this referral to the ICJ?
Want to go?
Sure. The ICJ, I wrote something about this just a little bit earlier today. The ICJ is not the perfect forum for this, I concede. The International Criminal Court, which, the file you're working on, or a fair, impartial domestic criminal court would be places where the families are much more likely to get real justice. They're much more likely, obviously, to get somebody in the defendant's box, to actually send someone to prison for, the horrendous crime that was committed. Alas, we don't live in an ideal world, and we have to deal with what is possible. And I think, the ICJ is probably the best available forum at the moment for the families to take their claim. And looking at the application, I was very pleasantly surprised when I received the application today that Canada is asking for the truth. It's asking for apologies from the Iranian government. It's asking for a great many things that I think would go a long way in addressing the family's demands for justice. Not perfection, but probably the best in a weak international system.
Thank you. And how do you build on that?
I agree with that. I think it's the ICJ, everybody needs to understand, is a court that resolves disputes regarding states' obligations under international law. It does not have the ability to interfere directly or direct specific domestic processes that need to take place. So it cannot, for example, conduct its own criminal or fact-finding investigation into the crash, and it cannot enforce criminal penalties. But what we can get from the ICJ, because we do have fairly strong international law to build on here, chiefly the 1971 Montreal Convention that enacts a host of obligations that states have to both safeguard international civilian air travel and then conduct criminal investigations that are meaningful, transparent, independent, etc. When an incident does arise, and I should say there's also an obligation to cooperate with other countries in conducting those investigations. There is a real possibility to get from the ICJ a finding that Iran has not upheld its obligations to do all of this, that Iran has not safeguarded the PS 752, which I think is obvious to all of us. But beyond that, that Iran has not upheld its obligation under the 1971 Montreal Convention to conduct a thorough, independent, proper criminal investigation and prosecution, and that Iran has not cooperated with other countries, chiefly Ukraine, which is the country of aircraft registration, to conduct their criminal investigations as well. And so that relates to the discussion around sham trials and what we all know to be true, that Iran hasn't properly investigated and disclosed the underlying facts here. And there's a real possibility that the ICJ will hold that. And just my own view is that, in Iran's fact-finding report, that leaps off the page in at least one glaring respect, where they've excluded from the scope of their own investigation all machinations internal to the military, which seems to be the center of this issue here. So to me, it shouldn't actually require that much persuasion, but I clearly...
it obviously does.
I'm no longer unbiased on this.